Okay guys, so today we're going to be talking about slope-intercept form. Slope-intercept form looks like y equals mx plus b. Some of this stuff is review. We know that y is always our dependent variable. We know that m is our coefficient to x, what comes in front of x. It's also known as your rate of change and your slope. We know that x is always the independent variable, and b is our y-intercept. It's where it crosses the y-axis, and let's go ahead and add one more. Remember, it's usually our starting point in word problems. Okay, so I know we want to identify the slope and the y-intercept. So remember, slope is m, the y-intercept is b for each of the following. Let me use different colors on these. Use pink for slope. Okay, so on A, I know my slope, m, is the coefficient to x. On B, my slope is the coefficient to x. Remember, the coefficient is what comes in front of it. And on C, my slope is the coefficient of x. So find your x, look at what comes in front of it. So now let's find our y-intercepts. Your y-intercepts are the values that are by themselves, right? See how B is all by itself? So the number by itself on A is negative 12. On B, it's a positive 3. And on C, it's this positive 7. So let's go ahead and label that. So on A, my slope, m, is 5. B, my y-intercept, is negative 12. Okay, on B, my slope, my coefficient to x, I see a negative. But I'm not going to write just negative. I know it's the same thing as saying negative 1x. So my slope is negative 1. Your B, your y-intercept, the number by itself is a positive 3. On C, slope is your coefficient to x. So I look in front of x and I see a negative 2. So my slope is negative 2. My B, my y-intercept, is the number that's by itself. So my y-intercept is a positive 7. Okay, so now we're going to do it from a word problem. It says Tristan borrowed some money from his parents to buy a new cell phone. The amount that Tristan owes his parents can be modeled by A equals 250 minus 50m, where m is the number of months that Tristan has been paying back his loan. Wants to know the slope. So we're using pink to identify slope, which is m. Okay, and I know this gets kind of confusing because they use an m in the problem, but if you want to help clarify this, you might want to put an x over the m. Okay, they're just using m in place of x because it stands for months. So we know that slope comes in front of our variable x. So if I look at my problem, in front of it I see the coefficient to my variable is negative 50. So remember, your slope is your rate of change. So let's think about what's happening in this story. I know he borrowed money, and he's paying his money back, right, to his parents. So in this story, what is this negative 50? What does this rate of change represent? Well, if I borrow money and it's going down by 50 every month, I know that is telling us he pays his parents $50 every month. So that's why it starts with the 250 and it's going down by 50m, so 50 for every month. So I know he's paying them back $50 each month. Okay, the next question is asking for y-intercept. Remember, the y-intercept is the number that's by itself, so in this case it's that 250. And it wants to know, what does it represent? Well, remember at the top we also said that usually in word problems that your B, your y-intercept is your starting point. Okay? Well, I know it's starting at 250, so what does that 250 mean as a starting point in this context? Well, I know he borrowed money, so that starting point is representing how much money he borrowed to begin with. So this equation, we're going to start with 250 because we owe them that much. And we're taking away 50 each month because we're paying them back $50 every month. Okay. On this one, we're trying to write a slope-intercept form of a line that has a slope of 5 and it passes through the point, -1, -7. Okay, so remember slope-intercept form. So above that, we're going to write y equals mx plus b. I want to write that equation. So in order to do that, I need the m and I need the b. Well, lucky us, it gives us m here. But it does not give me b, the y-intercept. Okay, so how can I find that given the slope and one point? But remember, a point is always an x and a y value. Okay, so watch this, guys. Y equals mx plus b. What I'm going to do is I'm going to plug in for y, for m, and for x, and then I'm going to solve for b. So if I want to plug in for y, I can get that from my point, because every point gives me an x and a y. So instead of y, I'm going to take y out and replace it with -7. So instead of y equals, I'm going to have -7 equals. Okay, instead of m, I want to replace m with what I know it is. Well, m is slope, so I know m is 5. So I'm going to take out m and replace it with 5. Okay, I want to replace x. Well, my x is going to come from this point. I'm going to replace x with -1. Put it in parentheses. Because when two variables touch, that means multiply. So parentheses means multiply. And I don't know what b is. Okay, that's what I still need to find in order to write this equation. So I'm going to leave it as plus b. All right, so now I have -7 equals 5 times -1 plus b. Let's solve for b. Well, right here, 5 times -1 is -5. So on this side, I really have -5 plus b. On the other side, my -7 drops down. All right, all I need to do to get b by itself is to get rid of this -5. To get rid of a -5, we add 5. -7 plus 5 gives me a -2. On the other side, my 5's cancel, so b drops down. All right, we know what b is, so now I can write my equation. Y equals, we were told m is 5, my slope is 5, so 5x. And then we put our b value. Our b value is a -2, so I write -2. All right, so that's our equation. Well, remember, b is your y-intercept. So I can go ahead and fill in my y-intercept. Remember, it's x and then y. So the y-intercept is -2. Remember, that's whenever x is 0. Okay, we still have to find our x-intercept, and the way I want to do that is by graphing and using trace, okay? So we want to go find where it's on top of the x-axis. So I'm going to go graph 5x minus 2. So 5x minus 2. Okay, so here's my x-axis. This is the x-intercept right here-ish. My arrows are in the way. So I'm going to use trace to find where that point is exactly. So I'm going to press menu, trace, graph trace. Notice it's on top of the y-axis. This is what we said our y-intercept was. Well, I want to move this guy right here on top of the x. So we're going to use this right arrow key until I pop up on top of it. Notice it says the word 0. Guys, the word 0 is just another word for x-intercept. So here it is. I know it crosses the x-axis. at 0.4 comma 0. So we know x when the y is 0. Good. Let's try it again. So I know I'm trying to write y equals mx plus b. I already know m because it's given here, but we need to find b. So in order to do that, I have to plug in. So where do I look to find my y? Remember, every point that is given to you gives you an x value and a y value. So instead of y, I'm going to replace y with 5. Instead of m, my slope, I'm going to replace it with -1. X, I'm going to replace with 2. And I don't know b. That's the whole reason I'm doing this. I'm trying to solve for b. That's why I'm plugging in. I want to plug in for y, m, and x so I can solve for b. Remember, I use parentheses here because when two variables touch, that means multiply. All right, so let's multiply this. -1 times 2 is -2. So on this side, I really have -2 plus b. On the left side, my 5 drops down. So to get b by itself, I have to get rid of a -2 by adding 2 to both sides. 5 plus 2 is 7. The 2's cancel out on the right side, so b drops down. Okay, so we just found b. That is our y-intercept. So let's write our equation. Y equals, our m we were told is -1, so mx, plus our b is a positive 7. So you can write your equation that way, but remember, -1x is the same as -x. So if you like that -1 to be left there, that's fine, as long as you understand that -1x is exactly the same as -x. Okay, well, we already know our y-intercept. We were told right here. So since we're talking about the y-intercept, I know it needs to go in the y position. That's the second spot. 7, and the other one is 0. Okay, so now we're going to use graph and trace to find our x-intercept. So we're going to go graph -x plus 7. All right, so here it is. This is my x-intercept right here. Notice that it's on top of the x-axis, so let's go find that. I'm going to press Menu, Trace, Graph Trace. Notice it pops up on top of the y-axis, so that's my y-intercept. That shouldn't match what you wrote on your paper. But I'm trying to get here, the x-intercept on top of the x-axis, so I'm going to use this right arrow key until it lands right on top of that x-axis. Remember that word 0 will pop up because the word 0 and x-intercept are the same thing. So I know my 0, my x-intercept is at 7, 0. So this is the x-intercept. So it needs to go in the x position. So we know that the x is 7 when y is 0. That's your x-intercept. Oops. Okay. All right, so we're still trying to write our y equals mx plus b equation. In the past two examples, they were nice enough to give us our slope. All we had to do was find our b. Well, this time they don't give us the slope or the y-intercept, so we're actually going to have to calculate both. Okay, so to find slope from 2 points, remember, let's label this is an x, this is a y. This is an x, this is a y. To calculate slope from 2 points, remember, I want you to start with the fraction bar with a minus sign on top and bottom. Okay, remember, y's rise. So 1 point at a time. I'm going to start with this guy. The y value is 3, so this 3 is going to rise. Its x of 4 has to drop directly below it. So the y rises, the x drops directly below it. Okay, move on to your next point. Y rises, so this is my y, so that 6 rises. Its x of 5 has to drop directly below it. All right, so now let's just calculate this. So it's a fraction, so I'm going to press Control Divide. On the top I have 3 minus 6, and on the bottom I have 4 minus 5. It's going to give me a slope of 3. So we just figured out slope. Almost there. All we have left is to figure out what is b, so that's what we've been doing, right? So I need to plug in for y, m, and x so I can solve for b. So notice, guys, it gives us 2 points here. So I have an x and a y here. I have an x and a y here. It does not matter which point we use. I'm just going to use this first guy. So instead of y, I'm going to replace y with 3. Actually, scratch that. Let's use this point because I don't want to get confused on. My y, let's use y as 6. Like I said, it doesn't matter, so we could use either one. M, my slope, we said was 3. X, we're going to replace with 5. I use parentheses because when variables touch, that means multiply, so 3 times 5. And we don't know b, so I'm going to leave it as plus b. All right, so let's solve. 3 times 5 is 15, so really that side says 15 plus b. My 6 on the other side drops. To get rid of that 15, it's a positive 15, so I'm going to take away 15 from both sides. 6 minus 15 is a negative 9. So we know that b is our y-intercept. So now I have my slope. I have my y-intercept. This is good enough to write my equation. So y equals, my slope is 3, x. My y-intercept is a negative 9, so I write minus 9. Okay, so we just said we found our y-intercept is negative 9. So that goes in the y position when x is 0. To find our x-intercept, what we're going to do is go graph this guy and use trace. So our equation is 3x minus 9. Here it is. I'm trying to find this guy right here on top of the x-axis. So I'm going to use trace, menu 5, 1. Notice it's on top of the y-axis, and this is what we put on our y-intercept. I'm trying to get here on top of the x-axis. So I'm going to use this right arrow until I'm exactly on top of it. Remember that word 0 will pop up. Boom, we found it. So my 0, aka the x-intercept, is at 3, 0. So my x is 3 when the y is 0. All right. So we just did a lot of work here. It gave us 2 points. We calculated slope. Then we had to calculate the y-intercept. So I'm going to show you all a shortcut now. Teach you how to use the calculator as a tool to do it for you. So when you're given 2 points and you want to write the equation and you want it to be done for you, you can use this thing called Linear Data Quest, and here are the steps that we're going to follow. Okay, I'm going to move this to the side so we can kind of see both. Okay, so I'm going to go to a new document, never save, and I'm going to go to Linear Data Quest, which is option 7. Okay, it says click and fill out the table. So if you look here, guys, this looks like a table, so I'm going to click it, and I'm going to fill out my table. Okay, so it gives me an x and a y. Well, if you look at your problem, it gives you a point. A point is an x and a y value. So under x, I'm going to write -1. Under the y, I'm going to put 3. Okay, but it gives me 2 points, so I'm going to have to put in both of them. So I'm going to go down to my next one. Under the x, I'm going to put -3. Under the y, oops, I didn't put -3. And then under the y, I'm going to put 1. Always enter out of that box. Okay, so you see your first point, -1, 3. My second point was -3, 1. All right, so we clicked and we filled out the table. Next, we're going to click graph. You see down here, this guy is a graph, so we're going to click this graph, and it graphs it for us. Then, to get it to write the equation for us, we're going to use these steps. We're going to click the menu button. We're going to go to Analyze, which is option 4. We're going to go to Curve Fit, which is option 6. And then we're going to pick Linear, which is option 1. Then you're going to have this box. You might need to scroll down in it. Notice in your box, it has what a linear equation is, y equals mx plus b. So if you ever forget, it's written there for you. Below that, it tells me what m is. So notice it says m is 1.0. Well, 1.0 is the same thing as just 1. Beneath that, it tells me b. I know b is 4.0, which is just 4. So it gives me m. It gives me my b, my y-intercept. So now I can write the equation. Y equals 1x plus 4, which is exactly the same as x plus 4. Remember, if you like to keep that 1 out front of here, that's fine as long as you understand that 1x is exactly the same as x. Okay, well, we already knew our y-intercept because b stands for y-intercept, so I can go ahead and write that down. So since it's y-intercept, we put it in the y position when x is 0. All right, since the equation is written for us, we're going to graph it and use trace to go find that x-intercept. So clear out of this box. We're going to go graph. The equation is x plus 4. I want to find where it crosses the x-axis, which would be here. So we're going to use trace to get there. Menu 5, 1. Notice it's on top of the y-axis, so this point right here matches what we wrote by the y-intercept. So we want to go to find the x-intercept, which is here. So we're going to use this left arrow until we're on top of the x-axis. Remember that word 0 will pop up. Boom. So we're on top of the 0, aka the x-intercept, and it's at -4, 0. So the x is -4 when the y is 0, our x-intercept. Okay, it tells us to write the equation in slope-intercept form. Y equals mx plus b. So I just wrote that on top, y equals mx plus b. So we need to find the slope and we need to find the y-intercept. Okay, so to find the slope of a graph, we need to pick 2 easy points, which is here and here. We're going to use rise over run. So I'm going to turn that into a triangle. Okay, so we're noticing how much it's rising. Well, it's going from 0 up to 40, so I know it's rising 40. Now we have to calculate how much it's running. So it runs from 0 all the way over to 20, so it's running 20. Can we simplify the fraction of 40 over 20? We can. 40 divided by 20 is 2. Our last step is to look as I go from the left. So put your pencil on the left side and trace it to the right. I know it's going down, which tells me my slope has to be a negative. So my slope is a -2. So we know the m. Now all we have to do is find b, the y-intercept. So I look at the y-axis. I see that it's on top of the y-axis here at 40, so my b is a positive 40. So now we can write our equation. Y equals m, we discovered was negative 2, so mx plus our b, which was a positive 40. All right, domain. Use a different letter. Let's use yellow. Domain is yellow, okay, which is our x's, and our x-axis goes left and right. So our graph starts here. So I'm going to trace that down to the x-axis. Starts at 0. And then it stops over here when x is 20. So we have 2 stopping points. So remember, when you have 2 stopping points, you're going to write your numbers smaller to the larger, leaving a space in between. You put your variable, domain is x, in the middle, and since you always start with the small one, you put less than symbols. I have to decide to put or equal signs or not. Well, everything on this graph was solid, so I know I want my solid lines. Okay, range is my y, which is up and down. So my graph starts here, which is at a height of 40. And it ends down here, which is at a height of 0. So my range has 2 stopping points. It has a high and a low. So remember, you always put the small number first. So it's from 0 all the way up to 40. You put your letter in the middle, which range is y. Always less than signs. Since everything on our graph was solid, I know I want the solid or equal line underneath. Okay, on this next one, it says to find m and b. Remember, m is your slope, which is the coefficient of x. Your b is your y-intercept. That's the number by itself. So I know my slope is a negative 3 over 2. My b, my y-intercept, is a negative 3. So that's our y-intercept. Remember, your y-intercept is your starting point, so let's use that to start our graph. So on the y-axis, go put a dot at negative 3. I'm going to have to enlarge this. Okay, remember, you use slope to move from point to point. Well, slope is rise over run. So I'm going to add that real quick. Rise over run. Okay, guys, notice it's negative. So instead of going up, I'm going to go down. So rise, since it's negative, I'm going to go down 3, run 2. So from here, I'm going to go down 3, 1, 2, 3, run 2. Put a new dot. Okay, so you could line these up and make a line that goes through them, but I want to go backwards to add more dots so it's easier to make my line. Well, guys, if I'm going to put it in reverse, I have to do everything opposite. So at this point, I was going forward. So negative 3, so my rise is actually going down since it's negative. I went down 3, right 2. If I'm going to put it in reverse, I'm going to do everything backwards. So instead of going down 3, forward 2, I'm going to go up 3, back 2. Put a new dot. So since I'm still in reverse, I'm going to do everything backwards. Up 3, back 2. And I have room to fit one more. So we're in reverse still, so up 3, back 2. Okay, let's talk about that one more time, why I did that. Okay, so we started at our y-intercept. Y is negative 3. So on the y-axis, I put a dot here. Starting point. We use slope to tell us how to move. Well, my slope was negative 3 over 2. So it tells me how much to rise, how much to run. Well, if my rise is a negative, instead of going up, I'm going to go down. So I went down 3, right 2. Down 3, right 2. Well, notice, I didn't have room to go down 3, right 2 again, so what I did is I put it in reverse. If you're going to put it in reverse, you have to do it opposite. So opposite of down 3, right 2 would be up 3, back 2. Up 3, back 2. Okay, so I draw my line through it. Hopefully you draw your line a little better than mine. Mine's a little off. Let's see if I can fix that. No, I won't be able to. Okay, so it wants to find the x-intercept. So I want to look at where it crosses the x-axis. Well, notice it crosses the x-axis here at -2. So that's our x, which is the first position. So x is -2 when the y is 0. Okay, so we need to identify our m and our b. Remember, your m is your slope. That's the coefficient to your x. Your b is your y-intercept. That's the number that's by itself. So we know our slope, our m is 1/2. We know our b is a +3. B is your y-intercept. So that's the y value when x is 0. So that's our starting point. So we have to start with that on our graph. So go on the y-axis and put a dot where y is 3. To move from point to point, we use our slope. It tells us how much to rise and how much to run. So it's telling me to rise 1, run 2. So from here, from my starting point, I need to rise 1, run 2. Put a new dot. From the new dot, rise 1, run 2. Put a new dot. Rise 1, run 2. Okay, so I can't go forward anymore. What I do want to do now is go backwards so I can continue it all the way through the graph. Okay, so if I'm going to be putting it in reverse, do the opposite. So I was rising 1, going forward 2. So to do the opposite, I'm going to go down 1, back 2. So we're still in reverse. So down 1, back 2. In reverse, so opposite, down 1, back 2. Okay, so one more time. We started with our y-intercept, our starting point, which was 3. So on the y-axis, I put a dot at 3. My slope tells me how to move. Rise 1, run 2. So from here, rise 1, run 2. Rise 1, run 2. But to fill out my entire graph, I had to go in reverse. So from here, going in reverse, instead of rising 1, running 2, I do the opposite. I go down 1, back 2. Down 1, back 2. All right, so there's my line. So now it wants to find our x-intercept. So I look at the x-axis, which is this guy. I see it crosses the x-axis here at -6. So my x is -6 when the y is 0. All right, later guys.